So I'm continuing the series on relationship astrology, and now I'm going to be talking about the part of relationship astrology that has to do with the synastry, which is laying two charts on top of each other. Now, you'll definitely notice one thing is that this approach to astrology is done best with the South Indian chart. This is one reason why I use South Indian chart, because it's an astronomically correct chart with the signs, meaning the signs never change in the sky, okay? In an eternal sense, they're always in those places. So when you use the diamond chart, the North Indian chart, it's based on the houses, which are always changing. But the sign chart, the signs are always in that place. So it's great to get your mind used to looking at the matrix where the sky is always in that order. It helps you align. Now the reason this is important is because you have the signs that we use through synastry. If you're looking at the North Indian chart, you're going to be looking at houses, and the fact that, for instance, that two people have the sun in the third house is kind of irrelevant. In fact, it's actually almost completely irrelevant as it comes to synastry. But if they both have the sun in Scorpio, that's significant. And again, it's really hard to see this using the North Indian chart. It's just not very intuitive. So, that little aside. The importance of synastry in the 3D relationship astrology approach, which is what I'm showing you, is synastry shows the buttons that are getting pushed between people. Now again, this is very specific. You know, the first group of videos we talked about each individual's tendency. You inherit that tendency regardless of the compatibility. You still have to deal with that individual and who they are. Good compatibility just means that there's more comfort around the person and certain things might not be as difficult, but you still have to deal with their difficulty, whatever it is. That doesn't go away. Synastry, specific to that, shows the exact specific buttons that are getting pushed between the two individuals. That's different than the kutas, which we'll talk about last. The kutas have something very specific also to show. But synastry is in some ways some of the most active stuff that you feel when you're around the person. This is like what you feel when you're around them. And it has a lot to do with the general level of comfort and ease, and again, those buttons that get pushed around that person. And of course, when we have things that are easier planets interacting, then it shows ease and comfort. More stressful ones show the stress. And again, all of these things are important. There is no thing where you would say, well, you know, the moon and Venus are definitely more important, but you can have just as much devastation and difficulty in synastry if you have like one person's Mars on the other person's, you know, Ketu or something. That can be very difficult in synastry. Of course you want to focus on things like the moon and Venus and see what's activating them, because the moon is how we generally feel around a person, and Venus is obviously the romantic connection. But you want to also put an important emphasis on the 7th house, the 1st house, through synastry. So basically, you know, you want to look at if someone has planets in the other person's 7th house, which would be the 7th sign from their ascendant. So let's say a person has Taurus rising sign. Let's say a woman has Taurus rising sign and a man has Jupiter in Scorpio. Well, that Jupiter is going to be in her 7th house. So she's going to feel, there's Jupiter, partner, right? 7th house is the house of partner. And women are attracted to Jupiter. So it's like, there's Jupiter right in my 7th house. So that would be good for synastry, even if there's not a planet there. So that's also an example. So it's not just one planet on top of another, but of course, that's also probably a more active button. When you have a planet, let's say in an empty house, especially if it's like the 7th house, it gives that feeling. Now, of course, it might be a difficult planet. Maybe one person has, let's say that man has Saturn in the woman's 7th house. Now again, Saturn is a stressful planet, but it also gives certainty, and it gives commitment and a certain seriousness that each person has for the other. So I'm going to do a video on each planet and what each planet does through synastry in this series. So I'll talk about each one of those things. But in general, you want to understand the concept. Of course, when all of the previous rules about gender and masculine and feminine and those things are at play. So, you know, Venus is still the karaka of relationships. So let's say that a woman has her Venus in Taurus, and a man has Mars in Taurus. Well, that's a very good match, because the man's Mars and the woman's Venus are naturally sexually, bonded. Mars, Venus are sexual pairs, and the Sun and Moon are sexual pairs, more in an overall sense. Whereas Mars and Venus are about a kind of sexual dynamic and a kind of attractive, power dynamic that's more related to sexuality. Sun and Moon are more related to sovereign and sovereignty and things like parentage and a larger soul interaction. And so, again, if you have man, sun, woman, moon, that's really quite good for that sort of soul connection. You also want to look for the reverse. Again, you can't make this mistake, because sometimes it happens where it's like, well, sun, moon, the woman's sun on the man's moon. That's very different than the man's sun on the woman's moon. When the genders get upside down in synastry, it can make a big difference, and it flips the gender upside down. When the woman's sun is on the man's moon, it gives the woman this kind of masculine role, and the man this kind of feminine role. It's difficult. Woman's Mars on man's Venus, again, that can be difficult, because then the woman might be the one in the sexually aggressive position. So all of those kind of genders line up as well. You want to see the gender integrity between the man and the woman in this synastry. Certain things are also very good, like, the ascendant is something that we're just comfortable with. It's our sort of general nature. Someone's moon and another person's ascendant, you're just going to trust them. If someone has a, Taurus rising, and the other person has Venus in the first house, Venus in Taurus, then the Taurus person is just going to find that Venus person attractive. They'll be attracted to them. If the moon is in Taurus, in that Taurus person's first house, they're just going to trust them. If Mars is there, they're going to feel the intensity of that person, because it's the ascendant. So it doesn't have to be a planet either, but ascendants and seventh houses are also very important. And of course, any place where there's a lot of energy, you want to also pay attention to. If one person has like 3 planets in Leo and the other person has their moon in Leo, regardless of where it is, it's going to be very intense. Or the other person has, say, they also have 3 planets in Leo. So there's this big pileup of planets in one sign. You're going to see this will be a strong glue and button that gets pushed. So you want to look at that synastry as like the active buttons that are getting pushed in the couple. And those buttons can show, comfort or discomfort or hostility or aggression or, control. Saturn in someone's first house. Maybe they'll feel a bit comforted because Saturn wants structure, but they also might feel controlled. Saturn on someone's moon, it can bring structure, and it can even bring a certain trust that the person is there to make a commitment, but it might be the type of commitment that's more like a parent, not like a lover. So all of these things I'll talk about in the individual planets, but these are some things to understand about synastry. Last thing I almost forgot, and that's the nodal axis. Very important in synastry. You'll often see, especially people that are, wind up being together for a long time, you'll often see there's nodes, that the nodes are very prominent in their synastry, a nodal contact. And again, this isn't always for people that are together for a long time. Even when we come together with someone and you see if the nodes are very close to one of the planets, you'll see what's really getting triggered in the other person. So the nodes are also very important through synastry to show which buttons are getting pushed. So that's an overview of the synastry part of the Relationship Astrology series.